And of course, the money win in Canada also counts on the standings for the national championships here, the world championships, really. There you have a good shot of the rigging. See Malcolm Jones's hand slid into the rigging, a glove and a riding hand. He's waiting for that horse to stand up straight in the chute. As soon as he does, Malcolm will nod his head.
Once he gets going, of course, that's just about the only contact he has with that horse is that handhold.
The handhold and the touch of his feet for that split second in the horse's neck. The timing as the horse lunges forward. This one's not waiting until the chute gate's open. Look at that. He kicked the chute before he ever got out. Well, a Canadian bareback rider, the top one up there, and he had a Canadian horse brought all the way here from Alberta, Canada.
Hello. My name is Malcolm Jones. I'm an ex-rodeo cowboy.
A former rodeo cowboy.
And the thing that I get asked a lot is, how did I get started rodeoing? What caused me to get started rodeoing? Okay, I got started in rodeoing when I was 9, not rodeo, but always wanted to play cowboy as a kid. I was 9 years old, and we had moved to Tabor, and there was about 5 or 6 of us who always pretended we were cowboys. And so to be a cowboy, you had to have a horse. So we would go over to the local lumber yard and get laths, and we would all have a stick horse. And some of those stick horses were pretty hard to ride. But then when we had the horses, we'd have to pretend who we were, what famous cowboy we were. And so everybody in our group, and there was usually about 5 of us, we all wanted to be Bud Van Cleve. And so in order to decide who got to be Bud Van Cleve, since we all done it, we'd draw straws. And the one with the longest straw got to be Bud Van Cleve. Bud Van Cleve is a local cowboy legend in Tabor now.
How old was Bud at the time?
He'd have been about 24, 25. Okay. Yeah, and he would have been the 24, 25. And at that time, he would have been the Canadian bronc riding champion. And he was also a Canadian calf roping champion in those years. And we didn't always want to be Bud Van Cleve. Sometimes we wanted to be the movie stars. So we would pretend sometimes we were Gene Autry or Roy Rogers or people like that. And we used to have some awful gunfights on the streets of Tabor. First time I got to meet Bud Van Cleve was every Saturday night in Tabor. During the summer, everybody would come to the town to do their grocery shopping and visit with all the neighbors. And that's where it was all done, was on the main street in Tabor. And Bud Van Cleve drove up in his big truck with his horses in the back. And he said to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, my name's Malcolm Jones." Of course, his family and my family had known one another for years. So he shook my hand. And he wouldn't let go of it. He kept squeezing it. I remember that. I would have been about 12 years old then. And that's the first time I met Bud. And we've been good friends ever since. So at the time I got started in horses, there was people by the name of Haynes that lived in Tabor there, and they had a farm. and I was always hanging out with them, and we rode a lot of horses from their place, and they were also in the rodeo business. There was Grant Haynes and Lee Haynes were our main ones, and their families. And so I stayed with them a lot, almost lived with them. They were very good people to me and my family. The only thing that I kind of backed off from was they were very religious and they were always trying to get me to go to church, which even at a young age I wasn't too happy about going to church. But we learned how to ride horses and find out what rodeo about, and because they were rodeo people, we got to know all the rodeo people that were in Canada, because like a person like a guy, Harold Mandeville, who was a great champion in bareback riding, and also at that time they called it steer deck riding. He was many times champion in that. So it was quite a privilege for me to become involved with them as a young boy, and they showed me a lot of guidance of how to get by in the world and how to ride horses fairly well. And they had a nephew who lived with them, and his name was Gary McDonald, and we thought we were going to be cowboys. In fact, we loaded up one time and went to Great Falls, Montana to go shopping for Western clothes. And we were in a Western store down in Great Falls, and we needed cowboy hats. So we bought two cowboy hats, one for him and one for me. And they were big things, big rims on them, and come back. But we didn't like the color of them too good. So what would be a good color to make our cowboy hats? We decided, well, orange would be a good color. So we put them in the dye pot and colored both these hats orange. And so that made us cowboys. But it didn't take us long. That was we would be embarrassed to wear them things. So I don't know what I did with mine. I think I burned it. This cowboy hat. Never got on and it bucked. Well, Lee Haynes, he took him as a car dealer in Tabor, couldn't ride this horse, so he solicited Lee to break it for a while. But Lee didn't want to get on it either, so he put me on it. And this horse could buck. And I rode this horse. It was no problem riding and getting under. And I thought, oh, heck, this is easy riding these bucking horses. But this horse had the habit of flipping over backwards. So it went over backwards with me and laid on me kicking, and I fell into a ditch, and that's the only thing that saved my life, I guess. But that was the first time I was ever on a bucking horse. From there on, we played around, Gary and I, riding cows. We used to ride the milk cow, and she would buck us off all the time. And so we built a chute and everything so we could ride a cow and get on this cow and ride her, and she'd buck us off all the time. She bucked me off one day and then tramped all over my head, skinned my face up. If I'd have really been smart, I'd have quit then. But mother was very upset that I was getting on these cows and getting hurt like that. But we were determined to continue on with our rodeo careers. So as a couple of years went by and I Gary and I decided we would go to a rodeo one time. And there was a rodeo in Clearwater, Saskatchewan. Now, where the heck that was, I didn't know. Never been out of the province or out of Tabor for that matter. So Lee Haynes had bought a brand new little car. It was called a Vauxhall. So he said, well, you guys can take the car and go to this rodeo in Clearwater. Okay, that would be really good. But you're going to have a place to stay and some place food to eat and stuff like that. So, yeah, so we took a tent and our sleeping bags. And the Vauxhall wasn't a very big car, but we had it loaded right down. And the equipment that we used was, we were going to become bull riders. Wasn't into horses at that time. So we traveled all one night to this place in Clearwater, Saskatchewan. I think it's north of Swift Current somewhere. And it was dark when we got there, so we pitched our little tent by the rodeo arena. And the next morning we got up, and there wasn't hardly any place to get anything to eat, but there was a little place down by the lake that made some drinks and some toast, so that's what we got. And then we went back to the rodeo grounds where our tent was. Well, when we got back there was people sitting all around our tent. Here we had pitched our tent in the grandstand. So we had to tear our tent down and move it. And we were entered in the bull riding. And I had never seen a Brahma bull before that time. And they told me, this is the bull you're going to ride, and they showed me which one it was. Well, he was a big Brahma bull with a hump on his back and big horns sticking out the side of his head. Well, I was scared to death. I didn't know if I wanted to do this or not. But oh yeah, they said, a fellow by the name of Mo Schneider, he said, yeah, he's a gentle bull. He won't hurt you. And so we didn't have proper equipment at all. So we didn't have the type of bull ropes they've got today that they ride with. We just had a rope with a knot tied in it. That was our rope to get on. Anyway, I get up in the chutes to get on this bull, and boy, this big hump that he's got on his back, and I was scared to death of this. I didn't want to get on this. They said, oh, no. He's gentle. He'll be all right. Mo was helping me a little bit do this. Mo is Cody Snyder's dad. And anyway, I crawled down in the chute to get on this bull. And this bull, he's wanting out of that chute pretty bad. And I'm scared to death, and I don't want to get on this thing. But anyway, they talked me into getting my hand in the rope and crawling down in the chute. And this bull, he's rattling the chute a little bit. Pretty soon, he gets these old wooden chutes, and he gets his horn hooked in the gate, and he lifts his head up and lifts the gate right off the chute. So down the arena I went, right on this bull, with the gate hanging on the side of us. Yeah. Boy, was I terrified of that time. Well, anyway, I bailed out of there. I didn't care. The bull, he finally shook the gate off, and he was a big old gentle thing. I guess he didn't hurt anything. He walked back to the pen. And at that time, that's when I first met Rocky Rockabar. And he had a horse drawn at the rodeo, and they were always talking about this horse. He was called Blue Bill. and Rocky was going to get on him, and everybody had to see because they thought Rocky could ride this horse. And this horse, Blue Bill, was a broke saddle horse. And so we get Jerry Myers had him. He was a stock contractor, and actually Blue Bill belonged to the guy who had all the horses there. His name was Bill Gummersall. So Rocky gets on. We're all gathered around, going to watch Rocky ride Blue Bill. And Rock was a pretty good bronc rider. Of course, we were young. We didn't know any of these guys. We didn't know what this was all about. And pretty soon here the Rock gets on, and out the gate he comes, and Blue Bill did buck. Boy, he could buck. And Rock was hanging in there. Right at about 6 seconds, he bucked old Rocky off. And everybody was sure that Rocky could ride Blue Bill. So that was the first experience I ever had going to a rodeo. Was that one there? We headed back home in the little old Vauxhall car, and had little wheels on it, little tires, and we blew one tire out and tore the muffler off of it. By the time we got car, old Lee Haynes didn't have much left of his little car. And talked me into going to a rodeo in Bassano. And so Gary McDonald and I, we loaded up with Lee, and away we went to this rodeo, and we entered me in a bareback riding. And I didn't have a bareback rigging or anything, but Harold Mandeville had one. So he gave me this bareback riding. It consisted of a piece of leather with some rings on it. And got to Bassano, and I had drawn up on a horse. It cost us $5 to enter, which was a considerable amount of money for us to spend at that time. And I got on this one horse, and I guess I made a pretty good ride. And anyway, I bailed off and ended up as when the rodeo was over, I had won 3rd place, and I'd got $25. Now that was my first taste of rodeo where I got money. And I thought, well, now this is the way to go. Ride these broncs. But I never got the opportunity to get on any more for a couple of years after that. And Tucky Wills brought in some horses into Tabor at the rodeo grounds in Tabor for us to get on and ride. And I got on a horse there, and I didn't make a bad ride, I guess. It was just for fun. We were practicing along with some other guys. Ted Vera was wanting to be a cowboy too, and so he was there practicing along with us. And didn't have much to do with getting in any broncs at that time. I would have been about 15 years old by this time. I kind of lose track in there, but we had moved to Lethbridge by then. And of course I had to have money, so Harold Mandeville lived in Lethbridge and run a ranch there and a farm. And so I got a job with Harold Mandeville every weekend and after school sometimes for $5 a day, which was a lot of money at that time. And Harold had a bareback rigging that I was still using, which was just a piece of leather with another something to hang on to. So he just gave me that thing. And I never got any horses for a long time after that. For well, a long time, it'd be a year. But I liked working with Harold, and he worked hard, and I worked hard with him. And when you worked with Harold, you had to work hard and build muscle. So I was building quite a bit of muscle. I was getting in very good shape. It was better than going to a gym, I guess. Like we'd pick rocks for days or haul bales, small squares. He had a little feedlot. Really everything was done by hand. And one day I got a job with working for my cousin who managed a big farming operation, and they had some land on the Blood Reserve. And this was, I was running a D8 cat, pulling 48 feet of cultivator at night. I was on the night shift. And that was quite a thing. And from the Blood Reserve, from where we were at, you could look back over and see Lethbridge because it was just across the river all the time. I thought that was pretty neat. Out there running their big tractors and looking back out and seeing Lethbridge right there. And then we got finished on that farm there, and then we moved to, they had a farm in Foremost. And so they moved me down to Foremost to farm down there.
Who was that for, Dad?
Graham's, but they moved me down there to this place in Foremost. And was running a big Wagner tractor down there, and then it rained. And so the guy who owned the farm, he's Graham guy, he said, well, this weekend is the Foremost Rodeo. We will want to go see the rodeo. Okay. So into town we went to the Foremost Rodeo. And while I was there, I ran into a fellow by the name of Gordon Ross. And his dad was Salty Ross, who had also been a bronc rider. And so Gordy was wanting to be a bronc rider too. So I wasn't entered at the Foremost Rodeo, but I got visiting with Gordy, and Gordy said, do you want to go rodeo? I said, yes, I'd like to go to some rodeos. Well, he said, why don't we load up and go to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. They have a rodeo down there. Oh, okay. When are we leaving? Well, tomorrow. Oh, how are we going? Well, he says, I got a 53 Chevy car. Well, that sounds just right. I'm going with you. Where are we going to stay at? Well, we'll take our sleeping bags. And he said, I got a mattress. So the next morning I went and I told Graham, who owned the farm, that I was going to quit. And I was going to go rodeo, which he thought was totally crazy, but well, he said, I figured that's what was going to happen with you. You were going to take off going to some rodeos. Okay, so he gave me my pay, $150. And next morning, Gordy and I loaded up, and Gordy had found a mattress. And we tied the mattress to the top of the car, and away we headed out. And Gordy knew a really good ranching buddy that was from down in that Warner country. And his name was Brower, and he was a bronc rider. He has a son who rode it now as Bart. Bart is his son. And so he wanted to go rekindle his bronc riding days. So we went, when we got to Moose Jaw, well, where are we going to put this mattress out? Well, we'll stick it underneath the cattle liners, the big trucks that were there. So we stuck the mattress under, and that was going to be our bed and shelter from, well, it started raining during the night. Mattress got wet. So we had to move inside the cattle trucks. And I was entered into bull riding there too. And I didn't really want to be a bull rider. But they had a bull for me to get on. So I got on this bull. Gordy was a bronc rider. And this bull bucked me off right away. And that was the last bull I ever got on. I never wanted to ride a bull again. So Gordy says, well, there's another rodeo up here in Saskatchewan, it's way up north. Shall we go to it? Okay, let's go to it. And it was Jackfish Lake, which is up in the northern end of Saskatchewan. Took us a couple of days there to drive there in that old car. And I was entered in bareback riding there. And Gordy was entered in the bronc riding. And it was a Vold rodeo. And damned if I didn't win second in the bareback riding. Oh, more money in the pocket. That was pretty damn good. And then when that was over, we went to another rodeo into Alberta. It's still going today. Forget the name of the little town that we went to, but they've had a rodeo there for years and years and years. And I was entering the bareback riding there and the bronc riding. So Gordy and I used the same saddle. And at that time, that's when it was a Vold rodeo. And Wayne Vold was starting to ride broncs at that time too. And he was a way better bronc rider than we were. We often suspicioned that he got the pick of the herd to which horses to get on. But, so I won second or third in the bronc riding at that little rodeo, in the amateur, in the bronc riding. And then Harry Vold said, well, you guys got to come to the next rodeo. Well, where's that at? Well, that's in Rimbey, Alberta. Boy, we're traveling here quite a bit, us two guys. This is going on to a couple of weeks now. So another week over, and we're in Rimbey. That's we're on our third week. And I'm entered in the bareback riding again. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of flipping and flopping around, I guess you could say that. And I won some money there at Rimbey. And we were living in that old car and sleeping in our sleeping bags yet. So then after that, we come to, and I think it was Stettler we went to. We were gone a month on this rodeo thing. Because they were just on the weekends, these rodeos. And be damned if I didn't win a little bit of money at that again. I forget exactly what I placed at. Well, by now, here I had about a $450 kitty built up. Come back home, and mother was pretty disgusted that we were gone that long. But I had $450, so then she calmed down right away. That was not too bad. So I was getting around the rodeo crowd pretty good. And come home to Lethbridge. And there was a friend of ours who had a Western store in Lethbridge and a saddle shop. So, and the guy who built saddles in there, his name was Bud Sharp. And he'd seen me at a few of these rodeos. Because he was a bronc rider too. And he said, that rigging you got, he said, we got to throw that away. Okay, we'll throw it away. So he cut it in half. That was no good. He said, I'll build you a new one. So he built me a new bareback rigging. And I used a little bit of my $450 to build $50 or something I paid for this bareback rigging that Bud Sharp had built for me. And he said, by now it's getting fall time and rodeos are about done. And he said, why don't we go down south this winter? Oh, well, that sounds like a good idea. I was still working for Harold. Well, yeah, sure. Of course, my mother was against all this going to Arizona. So, yeah, he said, we can stay down there with some friends of mine. He said, they got a house there in Wickenburg, Arizona. He said, we'll stay with them. Okay. So we get all ready to go down there, and Kenny McLean showed up. And him and Bud were good buddies, because Bud originally from British Columbia, and Kenny McLean was from British Columbia. He said, we'll all go down together. Okay, so we loaded up, the three of us, and away we went to Wickenburg, Arizona. I'd never been out anywhere like this before in my life. What an experience. And we enter these rodeos. Of course, they can't take my entry because I didn't have a card, a professional rodeo card. So I couldn't enter the rodeo that we went to. I think it was Tucson. So, okay, so we talked to the RCA rodeo committee, and they said, well, we'll get you another card. We'll get you registered so you can enter rodeo. So that was fine. So finally I got my card so I could enter the rodeos, and we went to Douglas, Wyoming. No, Douglas, Arizona. We went to that rodeo. Of course, I didn't win nothing. Green kid, greenest kid, all get out. And McLean, he could ride pretty good. So he won. He won first place. Then we go back and wait for the next week. And the next one was Phoenix. And I had a good horse there. And I got on and rode this horse pretty good, I thought. A lot of other guys did too, but I still didn't place. So then we decided we better get out of there and we better come home here. We had a rodeo in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I hadn't won any money yet, and the money was getting a little tight by now. So I had to stop at Lethbridge and borrow some money from Ma. Of course, she didn't like that at all. So I could go to Saskatoon. Went to the rodeo in Saskatoon, had a horse that run down the arena. Didn't win any money there. So then it was back to the labor force. Anyway, I stayed at home for the winter there and was going to school yet. Some days I didn't show up for school, but I was going to school. And come spring, they have this big exhibition out in Vancouver. And a guy by the name of Herman Linder was a promoter for the rodeo to go to this exhibition. And he had Kester stock out there and Vold stock. And Charlie Ivins, his son was riding bareback horses at the time, and so was I. We got to know one another pretty good. So Charlie said, you guys come out and enter this rodeo. And it was at the exhibition there in Vancouver. And at the time there, and it still is like this in Vancouver, the Society of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals is flying pretty high. And old Herman was the running this rodeo thing there, and we had an arena there by the football stadium. And there was a big arena. They drug some chutes in. And they got Herman arrested for cruelty to animals. They took Herman away anyway. He got bailed out and got back, and going to have this rodeo anyway. And I had a horse drawn called My Buddy. And I won the first go around on My Buddy. What a thrill that was. I got $175. And that's the only money I won, because from then on in, I didn't get the right draws or something. And come back home, and by now, all of a sudden, I was famous. Front page Lethbridge Herald was me riding this horse. That was something else. So I went back to school, and the principal of the high school at the time was Mr. Kyle. And I'd missed a few days of school to go out there. And he said to me, he said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to go to school, or are you going to rodeo?" It didn't take long for me to make a decision, and I went rodeoing. No more school. I'll be out tomorrow then. You can shut that thing off anytime you want. Yeah. You're waiting to come, aren't you, huh? You gonna jump in the truck?
Say that again.
Oh, wonderful.
Say that again, Dad?
Huh?
What?
I passed junior high school. Never seen such a thing as this before. Well, what do you think about that?
Congratulations.
Huh. I didn't know they give things like that out. They must have gave it to Mom, not to me. Well, and here's a list of all the subjects I flunked.
What did you flunk?
Everything.
No, you didn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, physical education, I got an A. Everything else was a D or a C. Okay?
Okay.
Oh, I got a B in auto mechanics. What do you think about that, Joe?
Good job, Dad.
Huh?
That's good.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
What was his name?
Centennial. He was a horse. He weighed about 2,000 pounds. He was big. I think after this ride, he dropped over dead.
How come?
I'm not sure. There's old Reg Kessler in the background. I guess I got to get my hat on, huh, Joe?
Sure, Dad. I went through the albums, and then I read some of the love letters.
Oh, the love letters.
And then I just looked through, like, a lot of them are magazines and the rodeo news and stuff at the bottom there too.
Oh.
So
The love letters. I don't know who. I know I never left my address with anybody. I don't know how they found out of.
Must
Did
have
you
been-
learn anything?
Yeah, it was interesting.
What was interesting about it?
Just that you had ladies that liked you, I guess, hey?
I guess so, huh?
Yeah.
How wonderful.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Now you know all about it, huh?
Yeah.
Just keep it to yourself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, who am I going to tell?
You'll blab it to your mother, nurse, for sure.
Well, I'm sure she's looked through them already.
I doubt it. My little doggy, yeah. Yeah, that's my little doggy. Yeah, that's him. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're such a nice little doggy. Yes, you are. Yeah. Were you thinking we were going to have a nap? Is that why you come over here? Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll have a nap after. Yeah. Okay. We'll only do this for another hour or so, and then we'll have a nap. Yeah. Okay. You got your pillow?
Slump?
I got in a slump and just wasn't drawing the right horses and that you could win on. And so you become kind of depressed or down on yourself that maybe you're not doing as good as you could do, and it was a mind thing. It took quite a bit of fortitude to, I guess you would call it, to keep going down the road, and sometimes you had to borrow a dollar here or there so that you could keep going down the road, and there might be another guy who wasn't doing so good too, so you paid his entry fees and made sure that he kept going down the road or took him with you or something. And it wasn't all roses and fun and games. Mind you, there was a lot of fun too.
So when you would get in a slump, then what would you do? How would you get out of it?
The only way to get out of a slump is to keep at it. That was the only way. You couldn't go home and sulk somewhere. You had to get up and go and get on another one. And eventually it comes around where you get to drawing again, and pretty soon you win a couple, and pretty soon you're back in the run of things again. But it can be pretty depressing sometimes going down the road to rodeo, especially the cost that it costs to get around all the time, because we were from one end of North America to the other all the time, every day. Interesting people, especially rodeo cowboys. Like the time that I won go around at the Pacific National Exhibition, I was sitting on the fence one day and this guy come up and sat down beside me. And he said, "You won the go-round on this horse?" I said, "Yeah." Well, he says, "I got him drawn here in a couple of days. What did you think of it?" I said, "Oh, he just bucks and ices." And goes, and here it was. His name was Benny Reynolds. He was the world champion all-around cowboy. And he rode broncs, he rode bareback horses, he rode bulls, and he bulldogged. He done everything. And I thought, boy, what a privilege it was to meet that guy. So these are the kind of people that I was in rodeo that I adored and admired all this time that I was meeting. And of course, because I was up and coming, they would always give me little tips on things, and I got to probably better professionally as a rodeo cowboy because of those people that I was becoming associated with in rodeo. Rodeo is one big family of people, and we all worked together, helped one another. I soon found that out, that that's how rodeo was. And as I progressed in the years, and all of a sudden here I was rodeoing with guys like Bob Deuce, who was probably one of the best bareback riders in all of Canada for quite a few years. He was a Canadian champion for 5 years, and was a nice gentleman all the time, and learned a lot from Bobby Deuce on how to ride. Unfortunately, Bobby got killed in a car accident. We were at a rodeo in San Francisco. I was in about, well, I can't remember what year that would have been, about 1970, somewhere in there. And we lost a very good friend at that time. But I found out over rodeo and over the years that was the ups and downs of it. Sometimes here were good times, other times they weren't so good. And because of that, we lost a very good person. And it hurt everybody in the rodeo world, really, for that to have happened. I don't know how else to explain it. It's pretty tough to get through some of that stuff. And I can't remember everything that happened all the years, over the years. You ready?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was riding pretty good, and that was in '63. And Bob Deuce said to me, I was up here in Canada, and he said, why don't you get down there in the US and ride some more rodeos, go to some more rodeos down there and get to go to the national finals. Well, at that time, I didn't really know what the hell the national finals were. So I started entering a few more rodeos down in the US, bigger ones, and was doing quite well. And be damned if I wasn't qualified to go in the top 15 in the world. I was in 1963. And the finals was in Los Angeles. And I figured, well, that was pretty handy. And here I was at the National Finals Rodeo. This kid from Canada. And all the world champions were there. And I thought, boy, am I hitting the big time now. And I remember Marty Wood was there, and he'd been the world champion bronc rider for 3 times by then. And what I remember by Marty Wood was in a big picture of him in this magazine he used to come out called Life. And that's when they had rodeos in New York. And he was a full page, front page on this Life magazine as they were promoting the rodeo in New York at Madison Square Gardens. And here was Marty Wood, and he was talking to me. And he had a broken ankle. And he asked me if I had any tape. And I happened to have some tape. I said, yeah. And he said, my ankle's broke, he said, but I'm still going to compete. So I gave him my roll of tape. Now, that was something else for me, to think that Marty Wood, who was kind of like an idol to me anyway, as far as saddle bronc went. And he was quite a showman, that he borrowed my tape to tape up his leg. There was little things like that, you know, that you try and remember, and then you learn to accept that. That's the way it is. And here you're in the same class as they are, and it's quite an honor to have been into that first national finals.
Finals rodeo here in Los Angeles is saddle bronc riding, and this is one of two events in which the national title is still on the line coming down to this final night of competition, right, Lex?
The two boys battling it out here are Marty Wood of Boness, Alberta, Canada, and Jim Tesher of Medora, North Dakota. Both of them well familiar to Wide World of Sport viewers. They've won a lot of these big rodeos.
That's right.
Marty Wood leads. He was ahead when the final started. He's been working ever since the first night with a foot badly hurt. He has to freeze it with Novocaine every night to get on his horses. Jim Tesher has won about $700 more than Marty in the go-around money here, and they are sitting real close to one another in second and in third place in the total markings here. So again, right down to the wire.
Right. And again, let's take a look at slow motion of this event, saddle bronc riding. Very much like the bareback, slightly different spurring motion, but the cowboy is marked on the same general aspects of his ride. Get in the rhythm of that horse, that's the secret. Here's some of the men. This is Marty Wood from Alberta, Canada. A lot of Canadian riders here in the national finals. Here's Jim Tesher of Medora, North Dakota. And another Canadian coming up, Kenny McLean from British Columbia, Okanagan Falls in Canada. There you saw it in slow motion once again, and here we go with the competition. Remember, the title is still on the line.
I was stiff shoe rider. And speaking of national finals, like then they'd moved this national finals to I think it was the next year to the Oklahoma City. And it come time to go down there because it was in November, December too, I guess, in Oklahoma City. And Winston Bruce had qualified for the finals, and myself and Dwayne Bruce. And we said, well, we should all travel together when we're going down there. Yeah, okay. Now, Winston and Dwayne are kind of a perfectionist type of people. Both were, especially Dwayne. And so at that time, my younger sister, she wanted to go see me at the national finals. So I said, well, you just well ride along with us. So I asked Winston, Dwayne, yeah, okay, Barb can come with us. So we take Winston's car, go down there, going to drive down there. And that's a long-assed way. And how I thought it was kind of eccentric of him anyway. We never drove over 60 miles an hour because Winston didn't want to wreck his car. And there's the four of us in the car, chucking down the road there, even on the freeway. There was not many freeways then, but there was this one still going at 60. And it was kind of rainy and getting dark out, and Dwayne, he says, all of a sudden, he says, I want to pull into a service station here somewhere, he said, and get a newspaper. And I'm sitting in the back seat, my sister and I, and I thought to myself, what the hell does he want a newspaper for? It's dark out, he can't read the damn thing anyway. So anyway, we pull into this service station we come upon, and Dwayne gets out, we're gassing up. And we'd been driving for quite a while by then. And it was taking quite a while to get there. We'd been talking about it before, we better keep on going because we might miss the rodeo. With the speed we're going. So Pretty soon here, Dwayne goes into this little place and he gets a newspaper. And it's dark outside. And he's coming out with this newspaper and he's tearing it up. And I thought, well, what the hell's going on with him? He wanted this paper and now he's ripping it up. And I said, well, and Winston and Dwayne both smoked. And my sister Barb smoked. And I was choking to death in that car anyway. And Dwayne, I said, what are you going to do with that paper? I thought you wanted, what are you tearing it up for? Well, to clean the windows. I said, what? Yeah, he said, it's the India ink that's in a newspaper. He said, and it cuts that film that gets on the windshields. And I thought, what the hell? So he's cleaning the windows with this newspaper, and I'm thinking, Jesus, that's all we stopped for, was to clean the windshield? And they were getting pretty tired. Finally, when we were leaving the service station, they said, well, it's somebody else's turn to drive. But we've been going this 60 mile an hour all the time. Because I think that might have been the year where the speed limit in the U.S. was 55. All you do was 55 miles per hour. And so I said, well, I don't want to drive. And I said, but Barb, she'll drive. Okay, Barb, get in there, and away we go. Well, that sister of mine, she was a little on the wild side. And so she blew the carbon out of Winston's car right away. We were in Oklahoma City in no time.
How fast was she going?
70, 80.
Of course.
Yeah.
Were they telling her to slow down?
No, nobody said anything. They just hung on. Just hung on.
That's good. But it's an all-round.
Well, I seen them. I was looking here the other day and I seen them all. This one here is a Canadian champion one. That one, 2, 3, 4. Well, there's the cat. Hey. Yeah. There's the cat. What have you been doing, huh? Huh? You're a pretty independent bugger, aren't you? You can be. You want out? There you go. Most of my travels for 5 years were in the U.S. I did some in Canada. Well, quite a bit in Canada, too, but tell you one of the incidents is what I was into is Bobby Gottfriedson and myself and Wayne Vold, and how we ended up in San Diego. I can't tell you, I can't remember why we were there, except for to go to the rodeo. The rodeo was a 3-dayer, and it was in the evenings. At night it started. So during the day we didn't have anything to do, but we seen this big roller coaster on the beach there is an area called the Pike. Recently I've asked a few people in that country about the Pike, and they don't remember anything, but I know it was the Pike, and it was a Navy stopover for big ships. So we went for this ride on the roller coaster. It was a big one, which we thought was a real thrill. And we went on it twice, which was something else for us. And then after we got done, it was in the afternoon. And there happened to be a few restaurants and bars along there. So we went to have something to eat. And then after we come out of there, hey, there's the bar, we'll go in the bar. So that's what we did, was went in the bar and had a drink. And while we were in there, we ran into a couple of sailors. And so they sat down and talked to us, to talk to these cowboys. And then we had another drink. And our drinking lasted until 2 o'clock in the morning. And in that time, we had collected a whole bar full of sailors, and they were all our buddies all of a sudden. And especially when Wayne got up and wanted to sing, because they had a band there, and Wayne liked to hear himself sing. And then we were really their buddies when that happened. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, they kicked us out of the bar. And so instead of going to bed, we went to one of the sailors had a house there in San Diego. He said, come on over to my house. So we went over there, and I said to Wayne and Bobby, I said, we better get sobered up here. We got to go ride broncs in a while. And both of them said, oh, no, we can ride when we're drunk. And had a few drinks, and oh, yeah, because they both had the best horses in the draw. Yeah, we're going to win first place on these horses. Okay. The horse I had drawn in the bareback riding just run down the arena. And then them two had the saddle broncs to get on, and so they got on these saddle broncs. Fairly impaired, I would say, but they could ride them when they were drunk. And both of them didn't make it past the end of the gate before they fell off. And of course, by now we had no money because we'd spent it all in the bar and on the sailors and had a good time. But we had to get back up to Canada to a rodeo. So we counted up our funds. Now we're in San Diego, and we had to come to Canada. And between the three of us, we had $17. And we had a long drive ahead of us. But fortunately, I run into one of the other cowboys down there, and I borrowed $20 off them. But I didn't tell them to. I put the $20 in my boot. And those were the days before you had credit cards. That's when you could write a check or cash. So we headed out, but pretty soon they found out, hey, they wouldn't cash a check for us. So we didn't have any money. And I didn't tell those two I had that extra $20. And we got up into Northern California on what gas we could have. And we were getting hungry. Never in my rodeo career did we have to stop and go to a grocery store and buy some bologna and bread so we could eat. Well, that was a big treat. I still didn't tell them we had any money. Well, we were just about out of gas, when I fessed up that I still had $20. That saved our butt because that got us a couple of tanks of gas. At least we got back into Canada on that. And that's when we could fill our cars up for about $7. My car up for $7. And I can't remember what rodeo we had to get to up here in Canada, but anyway, we made it there and borrowed some more money. That's in the days when you made sure everybody got their entries paid and got a hamburger at least. I remember one trip there, we left Houston, Texas, and we had to go into Little Rock, Arkansas, to a rodeo. And it was raining very hard when we pulled into Little Rock, which was an all-night drive at that time for us. We got up in the morning and it was hot and humid. And of course, us Canadians weren't used to that kind of climate. And the rodeo was out of town a ways. We drove out to this rodeo. I remember putting on a brand clean shirt, all ironed and everything, and as soon as you bent your arm, well, it was wrinkled up right away because of all the humidity in that country. And we had to go out to this rodeo about 10 miles outside of Little Rock. And the humidity was so heavy, you had to turn your windshield wipers on. And the sun was shining.
Ugh.
When we got to the rodeo, in time for the rodeo was going to start at 1 o'clock. And first they had to have the grand entry. The grand entry went on for 1 hour and a half. There must have been 1,000 horses in that grand entry. And we had to sit there waiting for our turn to ride. And us poor Canadians were just about dead from sweating because of the heat and the humidity. That's one of the things I remember very well. And we left there and went back into Texas again to some rodeo. And then we entered a rodeo in Santa Maria, California. Of course, that was a long drive across there. And Bob Robinson come with myself and Ted Varro. And we headed out for Santa Maria, California. It was a Sunday afternoon when we got into this little town in New Mexico. And Bob Robinson, being such a good religious guy, or claimed he was, had to go to church. Strong Catholic guy. So we stopped in a little town and he said, "You guys just stay here and I'll go to church. I'll just walk over to the church." He said, "Okay." So he left Ted and I sitting on the curb there. Well, he went to church. About 2 hours later, he still isn't back from church. Boy, he must be really praying hard. Finally, here come Bob, loaded up again. That way he headed out for Santa Maria, California. Bob at that time lived in California. He was going to college or something. He had dreams of becoming a dentist. He lived in a little town somewhere there in Southern California. So we stopped in there, let Bob out, and then we went on to Santa Maria. We were driving Kenny McLean's car because Kenny flew wherever he was going, and we took his car. It was a new Buick.
Is that because he won so much and had lots of money?
Yeah, he had lots of money. He was chasing the gold buckle. We got into Santa Maria, and I had a pretty good horse. So we rode this, took our turns riding this horse, or bucking horses. Don't even remember the names. I remember mine was a pinnacle. That's all I know. And he bucked pretty good. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't know there was that great of a ride I made, anything. Anyway, we had to get back up to Canada. And there were still 2 more days of the rodeo to go in Santa Maria. So we left, and we were going to the rodeo. It's called Hand Hills. It's up by Drumheller here. I'd never been to it before. There was always something else on. And we got into Hand Hills. And the chutes were big old wooden chutes. Seemed to me like they were 8 feet deep, made out of 2x10 planks. A little old arena that had page wire. It was 6-foot fence, page wire, and it had poles around the top, jack pine poles. And I was entering a bareback riding, and this is a test. This Hand Hills, I didn't know it. It was a test place for horses to go to the Calgary Stampede. These are all Calgary Stampede horses. And of course, I got on the bareback horse I had. He loped on down the arena, and I was entered in the saddle bronc riding too. That's when I started riding a few saddle broncs. So I crawled down in this chute to get on this horse, and you got to look up to see outside of these chutes because they're so deep. And he seemed quiet enough. I nodded my head, and out of the arena we went, just 100 miles an hour. This horse was just running like crazy. And I'm ruling the saddle bronc riding, you keep your feet in the front end until they break to go and buck. So I had my feet in the front end up and waiting for this horse to break. This horse tears down that arena and he doesn't break. And the fence is coming up. And I think, well, he's going to turn off this fence pretty soon. So I left my feet in the front end. Well, this horse didn't turn. He went right through the fence and left me hanging on the top rail of this arena they had there. And out into the wild yonder he went. And the thing that really ticked me off about that deal, I didn't get hurt or anything, was Santa Maria. I had won the bareback riding. They gave me a nice big shiny buckle. Somebody had come up with a bid in Santa Maria, and they paid them my money. It was $1,000, and this nice shiny brand new big buckle. And I had it on. Well, it was bent in a U because that's where I hit with that rail on the top. jerked me out of the saddle. And I was really, here's this nice big shiny new buckle that I had on. And I figured it was wrecked. Needless to say, I never went to Hand Hills Rodeo again. I thought that was a good place to die. That was my first and only time I ever went to Hand Hills. We were in Billings, Montana, the rodeo there. And it was a night rodeo. And Jerry Myers, who's a stock contractor in Saskatchewan, had got us to promise to come to a rodeo that he wanted to have in Moose Jaw. And we said, yeah, okay, Jerry. And at that time, when they started a new rodeo in Canada, we all used to try and go to it if we could to help it be a success of some kind. And so we drove all the way from Billings that night up to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And when we didn't know where this arena was, so we stopped and asked somebody on the street if there was a rodeo in town. And they said, well, they didn't know of one. And I said, well, they said they were having a rodeo. We drove a long ways to come here. Oh, well, maybe if they got a rodeo going, it's out of some sports field. Oh, where's that at? Well, they said you got to go south of town here, 10 miles or so, and there's a field out there where they got ball diamonds and a rodeo arena. Oh, okay. And this was in the morning, about 10 o'clock we got there. And it had drove all night. So we went out to where they give us directions for how to get to this arena. So we drove, yeah, there's a rodeo arena there, but there's nobody around. Oh, what the hell? But they had a ball tournament going. So we asked, is there a rodeo here? And a lot of people said, oh, they didn't know if there was or not. Of course, Jerry Myers was famous doing things like that. So I think it was Gary Jones was the rodeo announcer. He pulled in. And well, when he shows up, well, he must be a rodeo. Well, Gary, is there a rodeo? Yeah. But there was no stock there. There was nothing there. We didn't know what's going on. Gary runs down Jerry Myers somehow on the phone. And yeah, he said, I'll be there. I'll be there in a little while. Well, how long's a little while? Well, I'm just leaving North Battleford, Saskatchewan. That's out of Saskatoon. Well, we're here for the rodeo. It's supposed to start at 1 o'clock or 2. Well, he's on his way. Jerry's on it, which he's pretty famous for doing things like that. Okay, he had to stop and entertain the committee that he was with, so he got to drinking a little and forgot about that he had to be in Moose Jaw. But he was on his way. Okay, well, we'll wait around here for this rodeo. Of course, there's no grandstands or anything at this arena, just this arena, and it's 110 above, hotter than all got out. And we're sitting there waiting in this dusty, sandy hole place, not hardly a tree around. To get some shade, so we had to get some sleep sitting in this hot sun, waiting for Jerry to show up with the stock. And it gets to be 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's still nothing happening. Well, we watched ball games for a little bit, but I wanted to get some sleep. Dusty old place. Well, we said, hell with this. We showed up for Jerry, and he's not here, even with the stock, and let's go, because we got another rodeo to go to somewhere up in northern Alberta. We were just getting ready to pull out of there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. here's this gravel road coming into this arena, and here's a dust storm, and here comes Jerry. These 3 trucks loaded. Come on, boys, he said, let's have a rodeo here. Well, yeah, I hope so. We better have a rodeo here. What horse do we got? Don't matter, just get on one. Jerry said, oh, yeah, they're in the chute. We're loading them up. Okay, so we get on the chute. I don't know if this rodeo ever got recorded in the standings or not. So we crawled on these, running in anything that was in the chute. You got on, rode, and let's get the hell out of here. So we got out of there. That was one of the experiences we had.
What, were there lots of other cowboys that showed up?
Not many, just the ropers and bulldoggers.
And then did people come to watch?
Nobody showed up to watch this rodeo. But Jerry had it all approved and everything by the association, so that's why we come up and stayed there. And so we left, and I was so glad to get back to Vauxhall and get some sleep because we'd been on the road for 2 days by then. That's enough. As far as having me telling you which horse I got on, but I'll tell you about one experience I had. Was in Brooks, Alberta, and Kessler's had a rodeo there. And at that time, I didn't pay that much attention to which horses were around. I just got on and rode. And so here I had this horse drawn called 3 Bars. Okay, so it's 3 Bars. And I didn't know anything about it. And I get on this horse. Pretty nice looking horse. Well, she jumped out the gate, made about 4 jumps, and drove my head in the ground as hard as knocked the wind out of me. Like I didn't know. And I'm sitting there in the arena, can't breathe, trying to breathe, and it's all I can hear is Reg Kessler cackling, laughing behind his chutes about getting Malcolm Jones bucked off. Well, it ended up that 3 Bars was I think it was 2 or 3 times the world champion bucking horse. Oh, there was many of those that went on. The travel was the toughest thing of all as far as rodeoing is. Going back and forth all across North America. It got pretty tiresome sometimes. Remember I was in July, and I was in Sydney, Iowa, at the rodeo there, and I was just about mentally had the bun on as far as rodeo was in kind of slump too. Wasn't winning anything very much. And when the rodeo was Sydney, Iowa, when you drive in there, it's cornfields right to your windshield. There's not a big major highway went through there at that time. And where you stayed at was in people's houses because there wasn't a hotel or anything. It was just a rodeo arena. And people opened their houses open and drug in cots and stuff like that for us to sleep on in their living rooms, wherever. That's how we sleep. And I'm thinking, I'm not too enthusiastic about this rodeo business here now, if this is what we got to put up with. So I said to the rest of the cowboys, I'm going home. What do you mean you're going home? I said, I'm going back to Canada. I'm going home for a while. I was getting demoralized, I guess is what you'd call it. Burnt out. And it happened that I had my car there. Well, we're going to these other ones. Well, goodbye, boys. I got in my car and I drove all the way from Sydney, Iowa, back to Canada here. And I stayed hid out for 3 weeks to recoup my mental thing before I went rodeoing again. And when I went back, I come back with a different attitude and went to winning again. So those are the type of things. I think the traveling was the hardest thing in rodeo that there was.
When was that, Dad? Do you remember?
That would have been in
year?
65. Yeah. That was the hardest thing of all to rodeo on. I can tell you a few more stories about that. I don't remember what horses I got on most of the time. There were so many of them. Like I think the one year I got over 100 head of horses, bucket horses. And I got bucked off of 5 head that year. That's the most that got me on the ground. What horses they were, I don't remember.
Is that for bareback and saddle bronc?
Just bareback.
Just bareback.
Sometimes when you get down like that, you get in a slump. That's what they call. Every sport is the same way, I think. Players get in the slump, and pretty soon it takes a while. You just got to keep going and work yourself out of it. And fortunately for me, coming home from Sydney, Iowa that time, and then going back, it was come back with a different attitude. You come back with, well, I can do better than this. And it paid off, I guess. Anyway, they had some fun and have fun at rodeos. We used to always do some little thing on somebody around there. But Bud Van Cleve was the winner of pulling tricks on other cowboys. I can remember at Calgary, he would light a guy on fire. How he'd do this, he'd get a coat hanger and cut it in half or whatever, and then bend it over so he put a couple of Kleenexes in the loop. And then the other loop, he would, when he would see somebody going to get on, he'd slip that coat hanger with this Kleenex tied on it, on their belt loop. And and pretend he was going up to help somebody. Well, Tommy Buse was getting on a horse in Calgary this one time. And, the biggest outdoor show in the world. And Tommy crawls on, nods his head. Of course, Bud's up there pretending he's helping him. And out the horse goes in the arena and going down the arena. And meantime, Bud had lit the Kleenex on fire. And the Kleenex makes a big smoke when it's burning. Well, now that was hilarious. I can remember that to this day, how the smoke was coming up out of the back end of behind Tommy, and Tommy was trying to make the best ride he could do. Everybody was just killing themselves laughing over it. Well, Bud, he got into a lot of trouble over that one because you can't do that kind of stuff at the Calgary Stampedes. I think he pretty near got banned from rodeo for a while over that. But he'd still pull that same trick on you today, Bud would. And he's 94 years old now. And when you're around him, you always got to watch for him to pull something off on you, even today. Another time we were in Palace Hotel in Tabor. We were having a few beers. Of course, Bud's in there wandering around, and pretty soon this Bud is a legend in Tabor. Not everybody wants to talk to Bud. So this guy comes over and shaking his hand and wanting to talk to Bud. Sitting there, and Bud's talking away with him and letting it go, and Bud is smoking a cigar. He smoked a cigar all the time. Well, he got this cigar just about sucked down. It was only about an inch long or so. And this guy had a cotton shirt on and was kind of bent over, and his pocket opened up. Well, Buddy says, I gotta go. And when he went to leave, he took the butt end of his cigar out and dropped it in this guy's shirt pocket. Lit. And then out the door he went. Well, that guy sits there for a while, and he's talking to the other guys around there, and pretty soon he realized he was on fire. And what the heck? Who did that? Who did that? Where's that Van Cleve? Of course, Van Cleve, he was out the door and was down the street at the Royal Hotel drinking. And claimed innocent. And he'd still pull it off today if he could. Except he can't travel too good. It was Lake British Columbia one time. And that was in the era when everybody had a streaker running down through the arena. And the premier of the province was there giving I think it was Bennett, had to come and give a big talk to everybody and then thanking them for coming to the rodeo and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden, here comes this guy with no clothes on, jumped over the fence and went running across the arena. And all the cowboys seen him coming, and they picked up rocks and dirt and were throwing them at this guy. Of course, the old Bennett, he stood there with his mouth open, never seen him. The crowd was cheering. I don't know what they did with him when he got to the other end of the arena, but that's, just things like that happened. If you didn't do stuff like that, you'd drive yourself crazy at rodeos. If you didn't try and have a laugh once in a while. The Williams Lake Stampede, now that was a wild affair because it was still pretty wild in the first years that it was going. We were going to that rodeo. There was times there where they would always want you to have a bull there with horns on it. There was wanted a mean one that'd fight a little, and then they would call people out of the grandstands. They'd hang a tape of watch to his horns, and then they'd turn this bull out in the arena and invite people down to come and take the watch off the horn. Well, that was a real wild affair, that was. There was guys who went out of there with broken arms and teeth missing and everything, but one of them would get the watch eventually. It was pretty wild. They'd done that for years, till one day there was a guy from Calgary Stampede Board was there, and he was a lawyer. And he come and he said to the committee, you guys could get in a lot of trouble for doing that. He said, one of these days somebody's going to come and sue you. Ooh, no more bull in the arena. That was it. It was all over. There was a lot of rodeos at that time that were just starting up, and we went to the Grimshaw Rodeo in northern Alberta, up by Peace River there somewhere. And there was an old boy there, and he said, I want to have a rodeo He said, in High Level, Alberta. Oh, talked to Wayne Vold about this. That's when Wayne had taken over from his dad. And High Level was 120 or 30 miles north of Grimshaw yet, north of Peace River. And it was just a brand new road that went up into that country at that time. It was just built, I guess, for the oil patch. And this guy said, I want to come with a stock up there and have a rodeo. So Wayne hustled around and got some of us to agree to go up to this rodeo in High Level. And it's a new gravel road with rocks foot deep, it seemed like. So we all went up to High Level. And at that time, High Level, it's all it had was about 2 or 3 grocery stores. I think this old boy owned the town. And he just took a cat and pushed a bunch of trees down, hauled some chutes in there, and that was the arena. Smoothed it out, a little bit of dirt on it. And not many guys wanted to go up there because that was a long haul. But anyway, they had a hotel there and a restaurant. And so we went up to this rodeo, and of course you had to have the bulldog, and then you had to have the calf roping, and plus the bronc riding and all that. And them guys didn't want to pull all the way up that road. A lot of cowboys didn't, so at that time. So there was quite a few of us stayed there, the riding event guys. We had to have this bulldogging, and we didn't have any bulldogging horses there, so we were riding pickup horses to do the bulldogging. We had the rodeo, it lasted for 3 days. We had to stay there. And then we pulled out of there after a few days. Wayne had 3 truckloads of stock up there at that time. And we were headed back down south on this newly graveled road. I never had a window hardly left in my windshield was gone. All the headlights were broke out. The same with everybody else that pulled up there. Because those oil patches were always in a hurry and scattering rocks all over the place when they seen you coming. And we pulled into a little town there north of Grimshaw. And they were having, and one of Wayne's trucks, the transmission went out of it. And a guy by the name of Lathwell was driving that truck. So stopped at this garage that was there. Want to know if we'd put a transmission in it. Yeah, he said I can get a transmission in for it. It's going to take me a couple of days, so to get that, because you'd have to get it out of Peace River and all that stuff. But they were having a rodeo there. And that was an approved pro rodeo. And all natives and everything like that, they would, in that area, would come in and set up their teepees, and it would be a whole week-long celebration there. And there was an old boy there who run wild horses. He had a lot of horses from up in that country. And he's the one who was a stock contractor and put the rodeos on for these people. And it was very laid back. Maybe a bucking horse every 20 minutes would come out or something. So we decided to stay there and wait for this truck to get fixed. And Wayne sent the other 2 trucks on down south. And watching these horses go, and of course, Wayne is enthusiastic about seeing any kind of thing that'll buck. And they turned this gray horse out. And this horse jumped in the air 4 feet and kicked over his head. And Wayne had to own him. So it went to the old boy and asked him if he'd sell that horse. No, it was not for sale. And horses at that time, well, you could buy a pretty good bucking horse for $200 or $300. Nope, not for sale. So Wayne, he got up to, after a couple of days of partying there, Wayne got up to $1,000 for this horse, this gray horse. No, boy, no, he's not selling him yet. His name was Oliver. The old boy's name was Oliver. I'm thinking Travis, but that's not what it is. Anyway, he said he's not for sale. I'm keeping that horse. And Wayne said, well, I got a guy here that can ride him, he said. He said, if he rides him, I'll give you $1,000 for him. And I'm thinking, Wayne, who do you got left here that's going to ride this horse besides me? Of course, we'd all been, by this time, had been in the sauce a little bit. And I knew better than to get on something that, even with one drink in me. And Wayne's promoting this guy. Old Oliver, no. I'm thinking Oliver wasn't, no, I'm no part of it. No part of it at all. So we left there after 3 days of sitting around there in that little town without the horse. And that horse, the only jump he made was that day we were there. After that, he run off. He wasn't worth it.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
So old Oliver, he lost out on a good deal. He had to sell that horse for canter price.
Oh, no.
About $50. So that's, you know, and those are things that happen. Times we rodeoed in the Northwest U.S. We used to go down to Northern California in the spring and go to about 4 rodeos down there. They had every weekend they'd have a rodeo somewhere. There was Redding and Red Bluff and Sacramento, and we would go to those rodeos on the weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday they'd have them. The first rodeo we go to was Redding, and then, well, there wasn't another rodeo in that area until the next weekend. We did that one state overnight, and to drive from, say, from Lethbridge to Redding, and we could drive it in about 17 hours into that area in Northern California. We thought, well, it was better to drive back home than it was to stay down there and nothing to do except get in the bars and get in trouble. So we just come back home and then drive down the next weekend. And that Northwest U.S., they had some rodeos down there. It was called the Big Four rodeos. It was usually in end of August, September when they'd have them, and they'd have one every weekend. There was Walla Walla, Washington, Lewiston, Idaho, Pendleton, Oregon, and can't remember the other one. There was 4 of them anyway. And I traveled quite a bit with an Australian fellow. He came and over from Australia to a rodeo here, and he stayed. He's still in Canada, and that's a long time ago. Doug Flanagan was his name. And we were at Pendleton. And Pendleton, the arena in Pendleton is a racetrack that goes around the full-size racetrack, and then they got the chutes, bucking chutes on one side of the racetrack. And the inside of the The arena is grass, and it's just the racetrack that's got dirt, just the width of the racetrack. It's pretty wild type of rodeo. It's old time, been around for a long time. They don't have a barrier chute like they do for the calf ropers and the bulldoggers and the steer ropers they had there too. But Doug, he was kind of a character. He traveled with me quite a bit. We traveled together, and anyway, we rode our stock. Doug that day that he had this horse went across the arena, and as soon as he hit that grass, he jumped and kicked and jerked old Doug out of there, and Doug went out over the back end of this horse. I think the horse kicked him on the way down and landed on this grass and just about cooled him. And he was laying out there, and I was standing in front of the chutes. Ooh, Doug got, better go see. Nobody's going to help him. Well, I better go get him up. So I walked out in the arena and I picked Doug up. We're walking back to the chutes, and he looks at me, and well, I had a nickname. They called me Rip. And he said, Rip, you know, he said, I'll use the F word, but he said, I effing damn you're late, he said, in his Australian accent. I got a kick out of that. I laughed about that. So we didn't make any money at Pendleton, so there was another little rodeo down there in Oregon, over on the coast. We entered it. So we went and entered that rodeo. And then we had to enter another rodeo that was up in Washington called Puyallup. And this rodeo was in Oregon. We got in there, and for some reason, usually they always have the bull riding last at a rodeo. And I don't know why they had the bull riding first, but I think because we were going to be late getting there, they were going to wait for these hotshot Canadians and this Australian to come. So they'd already had the bull riding. And them bulls, as soon as they walk in the chute, the first thing they do is have a big shit in the chute. And so these chutes are all covered with bullshit. And Doug, he's getting on his bronc. And it's not a very nice horse. So he's just getting ready to nod his head, and this horse decides to go upside down. So he goes over upside down. And Doug is hanging in there, still got his hand in the rigging and everything, and this horse is laying on his back in the chute, and Doug's underneath him in the bullshit. And it took him a while before we got a chute open so that you could swing the gates around and let this horse get up. And Doug's laying underneath him. When he come up out of there, his hat's all bent up and covered in bullshit, and he's covered in bullshit. And everybody's laughing. It was a big joke. And because those kind of things, you had those kind of wrecks, and as long as you weren't hurt, it was kind of fun, really. And so Doug and I, we decided, well, we're getting out of town, or whatever that town was. We were going up to Puyallup. And at Puyallup, it was a state fair that they had there. And we used to go to it every year and get a motel with a kitchen in it. And we would stay there for a whole week right in there. And when Doug and I were going up to this Puyallup, well, we thought we better have some groceries when we get there, so we had a motel already reserved. And we were chopping on our way up, getting some corn on the cob, and getting a few vegetables and stuff like that on the way up. We weren't in a hurry because we were up that night. So we get there and we go walking into the arena after we checked into the motel. We weren't in a big hurry. And here was a couple of horses went running down the arena. Well, they were our horses, and the rules said if you weren't there, they turned them out on you. You didn't get on them. Oh damn! So here's Doug and I got our hotel and our groceries and everything. I guess we'd better. But I was entered into bronc riding too, and so I got on my saddle bronc, and so I still could stay in the rodeo. But Doug was hooped. And he said, well, I'm going to go up to another rodeo somewhere there in Canada, and there were some other guys going, we were down there going. So Doug jumped in with them, and I stayed there to get on this saddle bronc. And this horse, I'd never been around him. He belonged to Christensen Brothers. They were stock contractors at that time. Pretty well had the Northwest tied up as far as stock went. And I crawled on this horse. I'm getting on it, ready to go. And it's an old bucking horse that had been around for years. And I didn't know it, but when you got on that horse, you made sure that you had him tied down. It's tied to the edge of the chutes, so he couldn't go over backwards on you. Well, this horse went to fight the chute and went over backwards with me. Crashed in, the chute's made out of wood. Crashed into the back side of this chute, smashed the boards out of there, and left me laying underneath the walkway back there. No air left in me, and I'm hurting. And this horse crawled right out of that chute from the backside. After it tore the whole backside chute down. And so they load me up in an ambulance and haul me off to a hospital. And do the x-ray thing and everything on me over at the hospital. And there's nothing broke, anything like that. So I said, well, I got a horse to get on yet tonight. Oh, the doctor said, well, I can give you a pill, he said, a couple of pills, he said, that'll take care of you, but you shouldn't be getting on anything, you know, you have things tore up pretty good. I said, well, this is how I make my living, is riding these broncs. Well, okay, he said, I'll give you a couple of pills. So he gave me a pill, and in a half an hour I walked out of there. I couldn't walk before it went in there, the hospital. And there was nothing, didn't feel any pain hardly at all. He said, you take that other pill, he said, sometime tonight, later on. He said, and see how you're doing tomorrow. So I went back, I'm not any pain, and I got that same horse in the chute again. And I got to get on it. So this time we have it tied down. That's when I really got disgusted with a lot of guys sometimes at rodeo. In that country, I didn't know. And they said to me, well, we thought you knew that horse went upside down. Well, how would I know? I've never been around the damn thing before. They never told me that. So they had the horse tied down this next time. And he tried once, but then never tried it again. And I rode him, and I won the bronc riding at that rodeo after that too. And so I had to leave. The rodeo was over then, and we had to go. At that time, we used to work for a rancher there in Carameas, British Columbia. helping them, because it was another week before we had to go to another rodeo, so we got jobs. And Flanagan, he'd left. He'd gone with some other Canadians back up to a Canadian rodeo. But Mal Highland was still there. And the rodeo was over. And Mal needed a ride back up to where they lived there in Surrey, BC, I guess it was. So he said, you give me a ride. And he was only about 15 years old then. They said, well, give me a ride back up to Surrey to my folks' place. He said, no, I'll stay there. Okay. So I had my truck yet and a camper, on the little camper on the back end of it. So Mal, drove all the way from Puyallup, which is too far from the border there, British Columbia. Dropped him off at his folks' place. And then I went on to go to Karamias, which was another 150 or so miles. And I drove into the ranch yard there where we kind of worked for this Fred. Fred Reimer was his name. He was the foreman of that ranch. He used to be the farm boss for the Douglas Lake Cattle Company. And I just crawled in my camper and went to sleep because I was tired. And the next morning, when I woke up, I decided to get out of the camper. Well, that pill had wore off, and I couldn't move. I finally got rolled out of the bed in the back end there and got out through the camper. I couldn't stand up. And so I had to crawl on my hands and knees to the house. And I stayed there for damn near 2 weeks at the ranch, healing up. And the lucky thing for me, his mother-in-law was a masseuse out of Vancouver, and she was there vacationing with them. And she worked on me 3-4 times a day, worked on my back. Lucky she was there, because I don't know if I'd ever got up and going again. And she worked on me, and when she was done, I was okay. That was the only time that I was ever injured enough that I couldn't continue rodeoing. Going to rodeos, in my opinion anyway, the riding the broncs, and as far as doing the arena stuff at a rodeo, that was the easy part. Because what was hard was the travel. Traveling all over North America, especially if you were chasing in the world standings and having to go to the national finals rodeos and stuff like that. You had to get out and travel. And going from one province to the next one, and one state to the next state, traveling thousands of miles at a time, because you always had to go to the bigger rodeos. That was the tough part as far as rodeo went for me. I didn't enjoy that at all. Usually is what I ended up with at the end of the year was a 1-year-old car that you had to get rid of it because it was wore out. And the other guys that you rode it with were in the same boat.
How many miles would you put on?
150,000 in 1 year. And I can remember the 1 year last year that I went to the national finals, was in 67, I think it was, or 66. So all I ended up with was, money-wise, was a wore-out car, not much money left over. And you were very tired. That's why I left that. I just went home there from from Iowa that time, and drove all the way home and stayed at home for 3 weeks because I was totally exhausted. Then come back with a different attitude. And the other thing I had was a wore out car, was the used airline tickets, because we flew quite a bit too at that time. In fact, I flew with a guy by the name of Jim Beisch. He had a small plane. We flew together a lot. And I had got to the point where I could almost fly the airplane. First time we went on one trip, we were going somewhere into Texas from up in Montana. And Jim had been out the night before and was a little bit hungover. So we took off for heading down to Texas, and he said, "Here, you take over and you fly this thing for a while. I'm going to have a little nap." So he kind of showed me how to do this, do that in the plane, set and trim and all that. And he fell over and went to sleep. And I'm flying along there, and I thought I knew what I was doing. About an hour and a half later, he woke up and he said, "Where are we?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he kind of looked around. And a lot of the towns and stuff like that had the name of the town painted on the roof. "Holy hell," he said, "we're 200 miles off course." Yo, yeah, I guess so. So he said, he was a little bit ticked off that I didn't stay on the course I was supposed to stay on. But the wind was blowing, and it kept blowing me further east. So I didn't know the difference. That's just one of the things that goes on. But the other thing about the flying is we left a rodeo in Nebraska one time, and the little airport that was there at that town was, you had to take off and go drop over the top of the river, and go down on the riverbank. And of course, there was 4 of us in the plane and all our gear, and we were overloaded. And then there was a plane ahead of us that some guys were going on to, and they were overloaded. And so they took off before us, give her all she had. And they went, as soon as you dropped off the edge of the runway, you dropped down into the river, because the airport was above the river quite a ways. And holy heck, we thought, are they going to crash? No, pretty soon this plane come up out of the river, just a little bit at a time. So Jim said, "Well, get ready, boys. We're going to have to do the same thing." Okay, so we took off, and given that little plane all it had, and dropped off over the edge of the riverbank, and the river was coming up at us. He said, "Everybody jump to the front of the plane. When you do that, then you get more lift from the propeller." And so it come up out of there. We were just about on the water. Ooh, I didn't think that flying around like this was too much fun, because there's been quite a few rodeo cowboys that flew that didn't make it to their destination they wanted to get to. Or one time I was flying with a ex Air Force pilot out of the U.S. Army, And we were going to somewhere in Los Angeles, California. We're flying along, and all of a sudden the plane quit, the motor quit, and we were over the top of Los Angeles. And run out of fuel. But he had the type of plane with the wings over the top of the cabin, and you could float quite a ways with it. And I was a little bit panicked. No more motor. He said, just hang on, we'll find an airport and get down. So we're floating. Finally, he sees an airport, and so we just dove in there and landed. He got in big trouble over that one because it was an emergency landing around our trial. That was another scary trip that I was on. As far as flying went, I didn't care for that much. I decided then that it was time to quit traveling so hard. I was getting burnt out for being on the road. And so I decided that I was better off to stay closer to home here and just rodeo in Canada in the Northwest US rather than traveling all over. So that's when I cut down the traveling and going to rodeos all over the world because I wasn't gaining anything really other than the experience of being able to travel all over. When I stopped traveling instead, that's when I started making some money rodeoing. Before that, you spent all your money going down the road and buying vehicles. I'm sure it hasn't changed any for the rodeo cowboys today because their expenses are huge, even compared to what we would have paid at the time. And so when you figure it all out, you're chasing them buckles, them gold buckles to win the world. You spend a lot of money getting to that caliber, even getting to the national finals. It was a tough road to come ahead on as far as having money. So I decided that it was best to stay closer to home. So that's what I started doing, and that's when I started coming ahead a little bit as far as earning a living in rodeo. And then I started buying a few cows. And with the cows, I had to buy land. So I ended up buying our home ranch or home farm in Vauxhall. And that's when I started coming ahead a little bit in the world at that time. And then I made money. Besides, there was a few people from around the Vauxhall area. My address was always in Lethbridge. But people from Vauxhall here said, you're not from Lethbridge, you were born and raised in Vauxhall. So I decided to change my address and come to Vauxhall. I didn't have much on the home place here. My grandfather had a little place here where the buildings were and stuff. And I lived in an old railroad car. That was the only building was there. It was a cook car. It was a nice little place. And I had some corrals and stuff here. And I slowly started building up a cow herd. But then that took time too because I had to be back quite often to put up hay and make sure those cows were taken care of. And especially in the winter time. So then I had to hire somebody to kind of be here and take care of things all the time. And when that happens, you get people that don't want to work either. So then I started looking around. Well, there's got to be something else to happen. At that time in rodeo, we had a turnover of people in the head office in the rodeo office in Calgary, and everybody who had the job as chairman of the rodeos, they'd last about 2 or 3 years, and then they'd quit and move on to something. Who I took over from was Tom Butterfield, because they were in a more farming and feedlots, and so he had to take over there. So he come to me, and I knew nothing about what was going on in rodeo as far as the administration of the whole thing went. And he said, you could do this job. Well, I said, no, I don't think so. And then a couple of other guys come and said, yeah. So I guess there was something going on in behind the scenes to get me to become the chairman of the Cowboys Association. And we had an office there in Calgary. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll give it a try. And little did I know that it was a big job, taking over 500 unruly cowboys and doing all the business that was involved with it. But I dove into it head on and got learning a few things. At that time, Bill Pratt was head of the Calgary Stampede, and he got on me about it too, about doing this and doing that. And I said, well, I've never stood up and talked in front of people or anything like that, and which was part of the job. And he said, well, come in here, he said, and I'll sit down and we'll go through this and I'll teach you how to do it. So thanks to him, I learned how to do public speaking a little better, not much better than what I was. And once I got onto it, it became quite easy for me to get up and speak. You don't have to have everything wrote down in front of you. You just got to have an outline of what you want to do and remember it in your head, and just speak on it. And I said, okay, that's good. It worked fairly well. And Winston Bruce, you got him to do the same thing too, because neither one of us knew much about public speaking. And he hired Winston then to run the Calgary Stampede, because I didn't want that job.
Hold on.
But anyway, this become being the chairman there, and I had lots of ideas of what we could do, make the Cowboys things better for the Cowboys. And I had a good friend who was in the insurance business, and I felt that since the Cowboys had never had any kind of an insurance of any kind, that maybe Cowboys should have some insurance. So I talked to him how we could set up an insurance thing for the Cowboys, and he put me on the path to setting this all up, and it become quite a intensive thing too, to learn how to do all that. And so we come with if you got hurt, you were paid so much for the time off, up to a certain amount of money, and it seemed to work pretty good. It wasn't long, and every cowboy put $5 in for the year. The insurance companies Most of the others wouldn't touch that. That's why we started it ourselves, of taking care of the cowboys, because they all thought that every cowboy that got on something got hurt or got killed. Which, when they put it all together and figured it out, rodeo isn't that dangerous. There's the odd guy, you get a lot of publicity about it, the person that there's a lot of them go down the road for years, which I did too, and didn't get hurt that bad. So I got that going and up and running, and then seemed to be going okay first year, and then thought, well, we should have a retirement fund going for cowboys. Ooh. Well, yeah, so we kind of decided to get a fund built up in that too. So put that all together, all the do's and don'ts on that, and it took quite a bit of work to do all that stuff. But I kind of enjoyed doing that a little bit. And so within a couple of years, there was a pretty good fund built up in that, just doing those two things. Plus, on top of that time, then the cowboys themselves and some of the committees and stuff like that had discussions with all of these people. We should start a national finals rodeo in Canada, a Canadian finals rodeo in Canada. So we started where we're going to have these at. So we kind of let some of the bigger cities in Western Canada here take a shot at it. And as a board of directors that was there, I was not involved in it, but the board of directors. And well, we can go here and we can go there, and we had come down to two possibilities that were really anxious to get it, and that was Medicine Hat and Edmonton. Of course, Edmonton was way far ahead as far as putting this together than Medicine Hat would have been. He had a big arena, new arena that was there at that time. And so the decision was made with the board of directors in that we would take on with Edmonton. And by this time, I about had it burned out on being the chairman of the Cowboys Association. Plus, we changed it from the CPA, which was Cowboys Protective Association, to the Canadian Rodeo Cowboys, which it still is now, association. And putting out and getting out all the legal stuff for that all changed over and everything.
So it's the CPRA now.
The CPRA was called the Cowboys Protective Association.
When it first started?
When it first started.
And then when you were chairman, it was changed to the CRCA,
yeah.
Canadian Rodeo Cowboys Association?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was a big hassle. There was a lot of that. So that's when that was the board. I was along with the board of directors, and they were all in through. And it was some other cowboys too that were on the board at that time. But I was a sucker who said, yes, I'll be the chairman. So that's how it became called the CRCA. And the Canadian finals at that time, we approved to go with the Canadian finals. But then I kind of got involved with stock contracting business at that time. And how this involved that I became involved with the stock contracting business is the cowboys, rodeo cowboys, and horse show people, and the cutting horse people. We all socialized together. We're together. If we partied, we all partied together. And so one day I was sitting in the old Coliseum in Edmonton with C.N. Woodward, and he rode cutting horses, and we were just talking away. And prior to that, there was a stock contractor in British Columbia, native guy, Dave Perry, who had passed away, and he had a string of bucking stock in British Columbia. And he got bought out by a fellow out of Washington, the state of Washington. And he thought it was be nice to be a contractor, but he only lasted 1 year and he wanted out of that. So he was willing to sell it. And so Woodward had come to me and said, "We should buy that, Malcolm." I said, "What's this we?" He said, "You and I." He said, we'll get it bought up. And I said, "Well, I can't run a rodeo outfit by myself. That's a lot of work, and plus the cowboys." Well, he said, "You could probably do them both." And so I said, "Well, I'll talk to Ted Barrow, my friend," and he was a friend of mine, and we'll see what we can do. Put as far as buying this fellow out with the stock. Okay, so Ted said, "Yeah, let's do it." But he said, "I don't have a lot of money," and I didn't have a lot of money either, because I had bought land here in Vauxhall and had cattle. And he said, "Don't worry about the money." He said, "Just go to the bank in Kamloops," he said, "and we'll get it all started." Well, okay, let's go for it. So we bought this fellow out down there, and so here we were, two of us, never had anything to do with contracting, didn't have a home base in Kamloops. We had 100 head of horses, 25 head of bulls, and no place for them to go. What were we going to do? And we had to get these horses. They were in a pen. We had to have them off of there within a week. Okay, so luckily we were very good friends with the former owner, Dave Perry, and he was out of Cache Creek, BC. He used to run those horses on the reserve there all the time, and his wife was still kind of involved in rodeo, Joan Perry. So we asked her if we could run horses up there on the reserve, and she said, "Yeah, I'll talk to him and we'll get it done." So luckily we were able to load up 100 head of horses in an old beat-up truck and put them on the Cache Creek Reserve.
Okay, keep going.
And the bulls were in Gary Hook's feedlot, but it was right there in Kamloops, and he was very involved in rodeo. In fact, he owned some of the bulls. And he said, "Well, bring them out to the feedlot," he said, "and we'll take care of them there, the bulls." So that's how we got started. We didn't even have a place to live in Kamloops or a phone number. But at the time, Ted had a girlfriend, and she was a school teacher in Kamloops. And she said, "Well, you can use our house as," she lived with another girl, "as a headquarters, and use our phone." So we got on the phone right away and got all the committees that was involved with the stock there, and told what our phone number was, and where we're going to be headquarters out of Kamloops, and it all come together somehow. We stumbled along and got it all together. So that's how I got in the stock contracting business. I resigned from the chairman of the Cowboys Association, and because this was going to become a full-time job. For me, it was. Ted married the school teacher, and had a little house out in a little town there north of Kamloops called Ridley, and that's where he stayed, was there then. And I was running back and forth from Alberta to BC. Every week I made a trip. I knew every curve in the road from Kamloops to Vauxhall. And that was getting to be pretty tiresome the first year. We hustled along, and somehow we managed. The other thing that was really a benefit to us was Jimmy Pipolo and his family. They had helped Dave Perry when he was rodeoing, and they loved working around the rodeo. The whole family. There was his dad and his mother. She acted as the rodeo secretary for us. And his dad, he knew all the horses and put them together. And Jimmy and his two sisters, they came and done the grand entries for us, carrying the flags and taking care of the saddle horses and everything like that. And otherwise, I don't know how we'd have made out on it without that family, without the Pipolo family. And they hung in there with us all the way. Every time we went to a rodeo, they were the first ones out, sitting, waiting to go to work. They were a big benefit to us. And Joan Perry they were like her horses and everything, and she was happy to have all that stuff back. So that's how we got started in the rodeo business. And it turned into be a lot of work for me, especially going back and forth from Alberta every week and British Columbia. So I hung in there for 3 years, and finally I just got to where I had to do one or the other. Besides, I was starting to date a girl fairly seriously, and eventually we got married. My wife, Carol, and I bought another farm in Vauxhall with a big old house on it. Before that, we were living in the moth-ridden railroad car. Which was an experience in itself.
Okay. Okay, I have a couple questions for you. When you were the chairman of the CRCA, there's that picture of you and Pierre Trudeau.
Where?
There's that photograph of you and Pierre Trudeau. Do you remember meeting him?
Oh, yeah. That was part of the Calgary Stampede thing.
Yeah.
I was a chairman, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. He come to the Stampede as a politician, and I had to entertain him for the day. That was just one of the things that I did, yeah. Become political, but not for the Liberals. Okay?
Mm-hmm. And then, do you remember how you and Mom started dating?
No. You got to dance the medicine hat. Yeah.
And you were introduced by Hearns, right?
Huh?
You were introduced by Carol and Jim, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened? You were supposed to take her out on a date. Do you remember that time? And
No.
she got really mad at you?
Oh,
because you were at a rodeo and you told her you'd be back and you weren't?
That could have been.
You don't remember that though?
No.
Okay.
She's been mad at me ever since.
Okay, continue on.
I forgot where I was at now. You threw her.
You met a girl and you bought the Gertson place.
Yeah.
And you got married.
Yeah.
You made her live here in the shack for a while.
Yeah.
And then.
So we got all that.
Yeah.
And then I bought another farm, and so I decided I couldn't do both. And have you got that goal? And so that's when I decided to leave the rodeo company over there. I said, that's enough grasslands. And Ted, you can run this thing yourself. So I stayed with the company. Woodward and I stayed with the company anyway. And Ted took it over and started running it. And we never made any money in that business. So there was never any money around, or any extra money that Ted could buy me out. So I just walked away. And I stayed part of the company for 17 years. And Ted ran it. I went back and forth sometimes. But no, that. But run a rodeo company, it was kind of an experience that I don't regret, because we had these the horses and the bulls, and so we had to get pasture for them all the time. We couldn't keep running them on reserve, and so we had a deal at the 108 Mile House. There was some real estate guys out of Vancouver that owned all this land in there, and it was kind of they had the land leased out to Ernie Mulvihill, and they had a dude ranch, but there was more grass there than that, so we could run all our horses on that ranch there at the 108 Mile House. But we'd go turn the horses out, for a week at a time, or sometimes longer than that, 2 weeks at a time. And then we'd have to round them up. And them old horses, they got pretty smart after a while. When we turned them out there was quite a bit of open land, but there was also a lot of trees. And you'd ride out there with our saddle horses and to see where round up the horses and bring them into the corrals because we'd need them. And they'd go stand up in the trees where you couldn't see them. So then we'd have to ride around in there looking for these horses, and they'd hide up there. We could ride right by them almost, and they wouldn't let on that they were even there. But when we did find them, luckily, Joan Perry had kept all the bells. So on every 4 or 5 horses, we'd put a bell on. So that if they ever moved, it'd go tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. So we'd know where they were at. And it was fun to do that, to go round them horses up. And them horses will always follow a lead horse. So when you went in to get them and you knew where they were at, and one of us would sit at one end of the open field or pastures, and another couple of guys who always had another, like this Ernie would come and help us round them up and bring them down. So when you seen the horses coming, well, then your single horse, you'd get in front of them and stay ahead of them. And they'd always follow you. So they'd follow us right back into the corrals. So that was a fun job, playing with them horses all the time like that. I enjoyed that a lot. It was an experience. We'd even take them sometimes, a couple of rodeos in like Falkland, British Columbia, and they'd want to. We had a little pasture there that a guy rented us for a week. Well, we waited for the Falkland Rodeo, and they wanted the horses to come down Main Street and all that stuff. So we'd bring them out of that little pasture and ride ahead of them and bring them down through the town, little town of Falkland, block the highway off. That was kind of an interesting thing to do things like that. So the rodeo was, as far as the stock contracting went, it was a lot of work, even for two of us. And luckily we had good help that Dave Perry had put in place. Like our pickup man was Archie Williams, and Ron Godfreyson used to help us a lot, even though he had it as a pickup man, and even though they had their own string of stock, Godfreysons did, but we got along with everybody out there pretty well. I took on a contract after the Williams Lake Stampede, which was a big deal, and when it was over, they wanted us to come to a little settlement 200 miles west of Williams Lake, pretty near on the ocean. And so I went out there for a week and stayed in a tent because there was no motel, no place to stay. And it was all kind of fun, really, to be in that. But your body can only take so much. And I was running back and forth to Vauxhall because it was irrigated farm, and I'd have to irrigate and put crops in, and then on the weekend run back out there again to put a rodeo on. And so that was one of the enjoyable things about owning I did anyway, the stock contract business. In the rodeo business, I got to meet a lot of people. And when I was traveling in the U.S. all the time, we flew into Palm Springs one time out of Texas somewhere, another guy on a plane. And we'd flown all night over them big old mountains, landed in Palm Springs and have the rodeo. And was behind the chutes, waiting for the rodeo start, having a little nap. About 4 or 5 of us were back there. And there was this guy walking around back on the back of the chutes, looking at this and looking at that, and stopped. There was Bobby Kennedy. And at that time, he was running to become President of the United States. That's what he was campaigning for. And a very personable fellow. There wasn't anything stuck up about him. So he stopped and talked to 4 or 5 scruffy cowboys and found out who this guy was. Well, that was a pretty special time. It's too bad they had to shoot him. He was such a nice guy. Another thing that I had to being with politicians was entertaining Pierre Trudeau at the Calgary Stampede all one day. Had to lead him around by the hand, take him behind the chutes, let him see the rodeo, explain to him everything that was going on. That's when I was president of the Cowboys Association. And there was a lot of other people like that. Like one of my most famous people that I liked the most was Rex Allen. He was one of them Hollywood cowboys, but he could ride a horse. He was really good. And we'd be at those indoor rodeos in the wintertime. And there was always a little card game going because he come there to the rodeos to sing away. They used to hire them Hollywood guys to come out the rodeos and sing all the time. But he'd be there before the rodeo started, and then after he'd done his thing out on the arena, then he'd come back, and the Cowboys always had a couple of tables sitting somewhere, and we'd play cards. And everybody had a partner. Well, Rex Allen was my partner. And that was pretty special to me because he's one of the guys that when we were still riding our stick horses in Tabor, that we've had to pick who was a cowboy we wanted to be. I like to be Rex Allen. So that was special to be him. So then you go to the next one, he'd be there singing and picking and singing and whatever, and come back to play cards with us, and he'd always pick me to be his card playing partner.
Aww.
So, he was a nice, down-to-earth guy. He wasn't a phony or anything like that. He was a nice guy. So that's one of the experiences that I had that stuck in my mind for a long time. Anyway, when I left the stock contracting business and come back to Vauxhall to run the farms I bought, my wife and I, we had 2 kids. My son, Dane, who's a fire chief right now in Whitehorse, Yukon, and my daughter, Jolene, who lives on our home farm here now, and she works for the CNRL oil company as a reclamation expert. And these 2 kids, I'm so proud of them. They're very special to me. And I just adore them both. And son, he has some grandkids now, and I enjoy them all. So as far as my life goes so far, it's been pretty damn good, as far as I'm concerned. And I've got a wonderful wife who takes care of me all the time, because I need a lot of care. So thank you. Good? Anyways, you wanted it going now? You got it going now. There was one time I was with Leo Brown, Ed Garstead, and Bob Robinson. And we were coming from Rodeo in Billings, Montana. And I think it was one of those guys' birthday. And we decided to have a few drinks as we were coming back up to Cardston, to a rodeo in Cardston, Alberta. But we had to stop and get a couple of jugs of whiskey down there because they were cheaper. And while we were in the liquor store down in Montana there somewhere, we bought Mogan David wine. And away we went, and we didn't have any to mix with our whiskey breed bomb. So we used the Mogan David wine as our chasers. And we pulled into a little bar in Babb, Montana. It's right on the border of Alberta. And went into the bar there and continued on partying in this little bar. Of course, Leo, he would always go and pick a fight with somebody. So he found some guy that was a professional boxer. I forget what his name was. That was in the bar and they were drinking together. Pretty soon they got to arguing. And the barkeeper, he sees there was going to be trouble here. So he called the state troopers. And when the state trooper walked in the door, Gid walked up to him and said, okay, just hold it now. We'll, let's talk about this. Well, this state trooper, he wasn't in a talking mood. So the first thing he did was hit old Gid over the head with his billy club. Knocked him down. And Gid's a big guy. And I thought, but Gid got up again, and this guy went to wailing at him again, and that's when I run in, a little mean, and I jumped on the state trooper's back, and finally they got me pulled off of him because he couldn't beat on Gid anymore. I thought he was going to kill him, beating him with that club. Anyway, the state trooper, he grabbed me and threw the handcuffs on me and threw me in the police car and went back in to get Gid. When he was gone, I was still in the car and there was people talking on the radio, so I picked up the mic in the car and I was talking to whoever it was talking. And when he come back with Gid, half knocked out, threw him in the back seat, and he seen I had his radio. He said, that just cost you another 6 months in jail. Oh, tampering with police equipment. Ooh. So I don't know. He said, you guys are going to jail. So he loaded us up. And the jail in Babb, Montana was a dugout in the side of the hill with some bars on the front. Wasn't very comfortable looking. And he threw us in jail there. And he said, you guys are going to the big jail tomorrow. So as luck would have it, and that wasn't very nice. They left the handcuffs on us. And the first thing Gid did was chase two guys who were in there already off the bed. We took over the bed. So the next morning, but in the meantime, we happened to be phoned up a fellow by the name of Charlie Avings, who lived in Cardston, and told him we were in jail and could get us bailed out of here somehow. And he said, well, I know the chief down there. He said, I'll come down and talk to him. So he came down, talked to the chief, and the chief, he said, yeah, that officer of mine, he's kind of a hothead. He said, so I'll just turn you guys loose. So they took the cuffs off us, and he said, you guys get across the border now. And that's what we did, and that was the end of the story. And we were supposed to come back and appear in court in Montana to get sentenced for assaulting a police officer and all that stuff. In 6 months, we were supposed to come back there to go to court. We were all nervous about this. We wouldn't cross the border again because they might not let us go. But in the meantime, the, the, the officer that had arrested us had got shot because he'd beat up on other guys too. So one of the guys down there in Montana shot him. So they never had any witnesses. So we didn't have to go to court.
Were you ever worried crossing the border again to go down there?
No.
No? Well, do you want to tell a story about
I don't have any more stories.
your friend Wes?
My friend Wes. My friend Wes Ziffel. Wes and I won the Calgary Stampede wild horse race for 2 years in a row. He was the ear man. I was the one who saddled up and rode them. Cliff Vandergriff was our anchor man. And because it was a Cliff Vander team, they won the Canadian Championship wild horse racing, and he kept all the prizes. Old Cliff did. He gave us a little bit of money, but not much. And he had all kinds of money, old Cliff did.
How much money did you win?
Probably $100. I don't remember. It wasn't that important. They don't have that anymore at the Calgary Stampede. Must have been the Germain people must have got after him about it. I don't think they have the wild cow milking contest anymore either. They used to have the buffalo ride, but they don't have that anymore either.
What was the buffalo ride?
Well, they had all the native boys get on these buffalo and try and ride them. All at once, they turned them out in the arena.
Oh.
They don't do that anymore. I have trouble calling them indigenous. Anyways, I don't have any more stories to tell you, Joe.
You don't want to talk about your girlfriends yet?
Nope. It would be doing them girlfriends a disservice.
Why is that?
Talking about it. By talking about it.
Oh.
You don't need to know that kind of stuff. Even though you probably know some of them already, so it don't matter. Well, I'm going to go see if I can get the old welding truck started.
Do you want to tell me the story about going to Australia first? We missed that.
We missed going to Australia. I don't know. Went to Australia, booked in. And when I got to the airport to fly to Australia, well, here was Kenny McLean there, and his wife was there with their new son. And Dee Watt was along with him, and Dee was supposed to come and be the babysitter over there for them while they traveled around in Australia. flew into Australia, and your mother would come and met me at the airport because she knew I'd be there, her and her friends. And we went and got some motels out at, what's the name of the beach there again?
Bondi?
Bondi Beach. And there was a bunch of them Australian cowboys there at that time. And Carol was totally stunned. And so were them other girls that them Australian men would walk around in their gaunches. Like they didn't think anything was wrong with that, walking around pretty near naked. They were pretty near, so that's the one thing about it. Then I loaded up with your mother and her friends. They had an old car called, owned by the company was the General Motors thing. And I bailed in with them after that we stayed there, and we went up the coast. And as we were traveling along up the coast there, we had a place to stay, so all four of us would stay in one of them little travel trailer things that they called a motel. That was quite an experience. And Kenny was supposed to be, and Joyce McLean were out in the boondocks there. They were supposed to be teaching these guys how to ride saddle broncs. Kenny was, and Bulldog. So we went out there for a couple of days. And then went to the Australian rodeo finals. I forget what the name of that, Nambour was the name of that town where they had the Australian rodeo finals at. We went down to that. And then your mother and Armstrong and her friend, they left and went off to some, oh no, they were working in the Kentucky Fried Chicken place. That's what they were doing. And I had some traveling to do, so I traveled with Gary McPhee. Went to his place. So we went there, and they talked me into going to a rodeo that they had way out on the east side of Australia. And the whole thing was a setup. They knew I was coming, the Australians were. So they got their best bucking horse out. I knew it was a setup. They're going to buck my ass off, they figured. So they had this horse there, and I got on him, and he was the sweetest thing in the world to ride. In fact, I had to start laughing about it as I was riding him, because he was so nice to ride, and they thought he was a real tough bucking horse. Them Australians did. But the unique thing about that was, we went to this rodeo, and the contractor had all the horses halter broke, and all the bulls were halter broke, and they were tied to the cattle liners. There was no pens for horses.
Oh, wow.
Or anything like that. And the bulls, they led them into the chutes when they were ready to go buck. And every bull turned back, jumped out the gate and turned back. That was quite the thing. I said, the contractor, I said, how'd you get them bulls to turn back like that? He said, well, you see, they all got a ring in their nose. I said, yeah. Well, when they come in to shoot there, I got a little piece of wire. I tie in that ring and then tie it around their horn. And so they have to come around whichever side I had their horn tied to. He said, so that's why they all turn back. And then eventually they get where you don't have to tie them up with a little piece of wire, they just do it naturally. But they were all tied up alongside the lighters and the horses and the bulls both. There was no pens. Just let him into the chute.
Yeah.
That was something to see. But being in Australia, that was something else that I never got used to, and that was the flies. The flies were everywhere because they never get a frost there, so it never kills anything, any of them insects. If you were eating a sandwich, you had to make sure you kept it covered up so the flies couldn't eat it first. And that was the thing that I didn't like about Australia, was the flies. Well, we were there for 6 weeks. And then I loaded up, and when I was with Alan Hearn, he traveled, we met up with him there too and traveled around with him quite a bit. We went deep sea fishing with some of the guys fishing one day. Hired a boat and away we went. And Alan, he was pretty hungover. And so he got up on top of the cabin of this boat and fell asleep. Oh, and the sun was blazing hot. So we went up, after a couple of hours, we went up and turned him over and cooked him on the other side. So when he come to, he was pretty well burnt up. Then Alan and I stayed together for a couple of weeks and traveled around Australia here and there, different places. But I was glad to get away from Australia and come home. It's a harsh land.
What time of year were you there?
It had been summertime there. It had been January, February. Yep. What do you got that thing going for, Joe?
Just to come see what you're doing.
Huh? Okay, you can shut it off now.
Why?
I had it figured out once, but I can't figure it out again. I'll say fix it in 5 minutes with the welder. But I'll have to work on it another day because it's almost 6 o'clock now. So I got to be back in Tabor for supper, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Take a picture of your dog peeing there. Okay, I'm going back to Tabor now
Okay.
before your mother phones and wonders where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Bye.